Hi there, Randy Green here. It is still second day of Pentecost. It's still May 24th. And that gives it a number sequence actually of 6, 11, 7. so this is interesting in itself. And we have begun, yesterday we began week 21, as I explained, in the Jewish calendar, which is the lunar calendar. That is the foundation of the month and the week numbers. The week begins on Sunday, so that's the first day of the week, according to Jewish traditions, and that all goes with the 7 days of creation, where on the seventh day God rested, but that has always been seen as the what we call the Shabbat on Saturday, and therefore Sunday is the first day, which is also why it's called sun, as in Sunday, and then the second day is Moon Day, and then you have Tuesday, which is interesting enough because that alludes to Northern mythology, but it goes with Thor's Day, which is also Mars Day. So I'm just putting in, these are some of the things you can look up on the internet as well, because that will make a lot of sense to you, how the days are connected to different planets, and the gods were also connected to different planets and seen as symbolic representation, or the planets themselves were seen as gods in some of the older pantheon interpretation systems of Sumeria, which is technically the foundation of what we understand as astrology. I know that the Egyptians at the same time had their version of astrology. You can look into that one, but that was connected to the underworld. You see, Egypt, even though both Sumeria and Egypt were all about the underworld stuff, not that I'm going to go further into that, you also have that in the Hindu teaching systems. I'm just putting in background information. Look all of this up on Wikipedia to get the short overview stuff. You don't have to read whole dissertations and thick books about this where scholars are interpreting whatever level of information. These are just the snippets you kind of need to have in your backpack when you're trying to combine the different levels of information. And always remember, when I work with information, I work with memories, I work with visions, I work with what I get from my encounters with whoever I am releasing. And at the same time, I'm also looking stuff up on Wikipedia. I am also working scientifically. I do, as a rule, one class from either Yale or Stanford a day over the internet, not participating, paying for the course, but the free material, where I kind of get the working with my left hemisphere, and working when I work on the inner levels, I work with the visionary, holistic approach, which is my right hemisphere. When I work scientifically, I work with my left hemisphere. And what I'm doing in this, trying to explain how I work this, is to recalibrate my brain technically. And I want to touch ground with a lot of both personal experiences, because I think they have value for you. So you kind of, instead of me just telling you at the end of the process, this is how it is, I'm telling you as part of the process, which is what I began when I worked through the heart field, which is what the whole class is technically is an expression of me completing the heart field work. And now here, going back to the Bailey material, which is all focused on moving into the mental fields, I am putting that back in, as well as studies of scientific information, of what scientists have come up with, what is their interpretation of systems, knowing that this is not the truth. These are human interpretation systems within what they can see and understand in their context of reality, but it's good and fine, because that is also useful. And then combine it with my knowledge, what I have got in my head, so to speak, and what I have had in my head since early childhood, and what I know, as in I know, but I haven't got the language for it. And this is why I'm doing this whole complex structure building of different thought forms. And we can always say that's pseudoscience, that's not scientific, and yada yada and all these kind of things. But we also have to put into context that the way that science works today is a mythology that is no more than 200 years old. When we talk about the entire human history, it has always been other dimensionally infused. Always, always, always. It just completely spun off in the Middle Ages because of the church and the Baals and what they were attempting to do, being led by the dark forces, of course, dragging everyone down to the lower levels of the astral plane, including the underworld that is, of course, connected to the astral plane. That's the downside of the astral plane. The more inertia there is, the more distorted it gets, the more you get these underworld energies allowing that to surface. And that's what the Baals are all about. And that's the Taurus, and that's the Bull, and that's the Aldebaran system. And that's the one we also had in play during First and Second World War. These souls that are dating back to the Aldebaran system and some of the old wars in heaven between the Aldebarans and the Niburians. That is my information. This is my memory. So again, when some of the things you can find in Bailey, but I'm adding in what I know. I'm interpreting Bailey from my knowledge base, what I remember also. So you get that into perspective as well. Whenever we look at some text or some material, we will always interpret it through our mental capacity, our energy fields, and what we have. And when you go into working with the 4 mental fields that you have built through your work with the heart field, and you have cleared the timelines and you have reconstructed your astral fields to be infused with the code systems behind them, you technically create 4 mental fields. These 4 mental fields are now imbued with all of your memories that you have regained, and they then become what's called mental memory fields. And this is where you begin to work with the next set of 4 code system layers that will then transform these memory fields into their correct order and their correct pattern, from where you can begin to integrate your upper template knowledge that is in the 6th dimension. This is where you change your brain field into becoming an influential sphere divided in different concentric circles around your head, from where you begin with the normal human sciences and the normal way the brain works electrochemically as wave patterns, and that's why it's called the radiation field, and you expand it into the other dimensions, where you begin to work with other dimensional memories of who and what you were. And the code sheets, the 4 different code sheets that are behind your brain field, is what will allow you to regain your original consciousness structure. So this is the work I have started on. But I began that years ago. I began that technically at the same time I was working with my heart field. And I'm going to touch ground with different levels of information today, as in kind of a little bit of a personal how to work with my brain, as well as going into some of the root races, combining a little bit of information. And I think I will start with the root races, because to get that one off my chest, because that is technically connected to the previous 2 videos. When I talk about Joshua and the character Joshua, I have, as I said, it has always meant a lot to me because of my grandfather and the emotional setting or setup that was around that during my childhood. But I also said my grandfather grew out of it, so that changed the energy of it. It would have been different if he had died a devout Christian, but it changed the family dynamics, and it changed our family from being what you could call within the sphere of normality into being more alternatively oriented. And that rippled out throughout all of my uncles and aunts and whatever was in my family. And that was a good thing. It's not that we were a typical Christian family, never really was, because we were also on my mother's side what we could call intellectuals. So this goes in. My father's side is what you call merchant, or within commercial business structure. So this is the two types of lineages that I am born out of, in the intellectual what you could call properties and business commercial properties. And these are important things because they are merged in me. These are foundational layer of who I am. That's why I studied business as well, and business cultures and finances and all these things. I got that from my father. And at the same time, I had the whole mystic, introvert, my grandfather was actually born in Pisces, type of energy where the whole seeking for answers, the search for knowledge, the search for information as well as built up on scientific understanding were on my mother's side. Not that my mother was particularly scientific. She was to begin with, but she after giving birth, something changed in her. Before that, she was a different woman. But becoming a mom changed her, and she became more and more what we could call astral infused, and were already a very emotional personality structure. But the clashes between what our parents are and their lineages are a part of our molecular structure. So that is some of whenever we look back and say, why did you choose to do that? Because it's technically built into that's what your build of. That's the building blocks of your energy system that is driving you in two directions. Being from my mother, very emotional. Being from my father, very rational. My father was born in Virgo. My mother is a Ram. Or an Aries. So this is also pointing in specific directions that are running me in different ways. My sister is born in Aries as well. And I got Saturn in Aries in the 8th house, which is also telling a little bit about who and what I am, not within normal astrology, but we go with esoteric astrology here. So this is again alluding to Bailey. And at some point, I know at some point in the future will make some kind of system using Bailey astrology as well as what I know and what I see and how I understand things, because it's building up very slowly. But this is one of the really, really deeply hidden systems that are not being given out there for free, because, as I said, the astrology chart as it is right now, astrology as it is now, is a Baal system. So it's a system of enslavement. You need to understand the Baals, the Mardukians, are all about the enslavement, and they are strongly positioned within the church, within business, within financial systems, and all of these that are in many ways have been loaded off as being under the Zionites or the Jewish control, whatever. And they might actually not be that, but this is the whole cloaking and the whole creating specific groups that are focused on other groups to point it in a different direction. What the left hand is doing does not know what the right hand is doing. And the whole deception that goes with these races that are actually in control of our reality. They constantly push out disinformation that makes people look in the wrong direction, give it energy to something that is not what is actually going on. And the whole disclosure is also be seen in that manipulation scheme of ensuring that you get bits and pieces of the information, but you never get the whole truth. So this is where we need to be investigators, and we need to follow our inner knowledge of what we know and then find it here and there. And this has always been a big, deeply rooted understanding I had ever since I was a very young girl. So this is again what sets me apart. And I know I talk about my family setting, and trust me, I have cried my tears while I was doing becoming a psychotherapist. And as I worked my way up to being able to take care of other people, you have to be able to take care of yourself first before you take care of other people. So that is a necessity when you become a certified psychotherapist, of course. So this is why I can talk about it in that casual manner and laugh a little bit about it and these kind of things, because I've done with these processes. But they are, what I want to put in here is not that you get my sad, sobbing story. This is about the processes and the family settings we put into that, if we use it in the right way, can become a strength. That can become something we can use to understand why we're here and what we're doing here, and what is the regaining and remembering who and what we are. That the adversities, that the things that we have gone through are part of a much, much bigger plot that goes with different forms of manipulation of the root races. And even though I referred back to the root races of Blavatsky, which is the first one that brings the idea of root races to the table, again, look root race up on Wikipedia and see what is said there, and know that this is not the full picture. When I read about the root races and how, or the seed races, as Bailey calls them, when I look upon what Blavatsky had listed up, I can see, yes, this one is the true one. Yes, this one is the true one. No, that's a false one. No, that is misinterpretation. No, that's disinformation. So I know which one to look for. And I also look into the whole kind of combination of information. So I get this feeling of looking up root races, which I did, and then I got the whole fifth root race which we are part of, and the first root race of the main root race, the Aryans, are the Hindus. And then I was looking into kind of, okay, that fits with why we have in the Bailey material the whole Sanat Kumara, why he is important. So the Hindus must then be connected to Venus, right? Because Sanat Kumara comes from Venus. So there must be some affiliation going on there. At the same time, when I was working with NOAA and I got dragged in against my will, NOAA is an American military project, and I was dragged into that one. What I saw on these underworld bases that were technically subterranean were the Iron Shivas. These were literally, if you look up on the internet and you look at Shiva, see how he is depicted, that's a Hindu god. That's what I saw. I saw the ones with white skin. I saw the ones with blue skin, which kind of makes me, when I look at the depictions of the Hindu gods, kind of they're green skinned and red skinned and blue skinned, and we always kind of thought, well, that's just a colorful interpretation of whatever these gods are. You have the same if you go with the Egyptian god, the Egyptian creator god, which is called Ptah, however that's expressed. I don't speak Egyptian. He is depicted with green skin. And from where I'm standing, all of the encounters I've had, some of them, of course, distortions, and some of them are programs, some of them holographic representation of a race, which then behind is something completely different. So not always to take it for face value, whatever you're seeing on the other dimensions. But the coloration of the skins is actually, I've seen in Australia as well, I have had bleed-throughs in older areas where I saw some of the very first civilizations in Australia that has nothing to do with the indigenous people or the Aboriginals or the later seed races that came there from, again, the copper-colored skin. These are technically what we call sub-races of Lemuria. But, or technically first sub-races of Lemuria, and then going into, and I'm here talking about human projects done by aliens on our planet, and then the colonization of our planet from different alien factions, and then from the red skin or the copper skinned seed races that were similar to also the ones that was that kind of DNA structure were also, the first ones were actually used in after Atlantis in Egypt. I'm just saying that the DNA that was used in the Aboriginals go back to Lemuria. That's why Australia has the Lemurian grid, which I've been talking about all the time, but in a highly re-engineered fashion after the hijacking. Even though the hijacking happened 15,000 years ago, and if you look into the skeletons of the Australia forensilis or whatever they are called, the first species of humans in Australia, they are 200,000 years old, 250,000 years old, and this does not make sense to us. But again, the current version of the Aboriginals are the re-engineered version of it, and whatever is found in the soil, in the deeper layers of our planetary sediments and the layers of soil are of a previous earlier human experimentation programs. Again, seed races that have been put in to develop specific types of DNA. And this is what the root races are to be seen as. Different developmental programs of different forms of human DNA to create new types of human vessels that would allow for the merging and integration or the production of different forms of genetics for these other racial species. Instead of calling them extraterrestrials, I call them other racial species that are part of our system, putting us back into the family and not making them and us, because when you say extraterrestrial, it's kind of crazy into two different groups as them and us. Because we have our terrestrial race, and then there are the extra, the ones beyond our race that comes from other systems. So they are the others, where we are us, and we are earthlings, and we are human race, and we have nothing to do with them. And that's what goes with the word extraterrestrial. So let's cut that one aside and say these are other dimensional races that are part of our racial grids as well, because humanity are sprung from these races through different types of DNA experimentation. information, which we know, all of you that have studied either the quantum sciences or whatever was brought forth by Aryan, or what was brought forth in the 80s and the 90s and the 2000s. This is all about this understanding that we are technically, in many ways, engineered for specific purposes under these races, which is where I put back into the root races. Now, when I began work with the concept of root races, I always thought that the root races were humans, right? Humans like you and me. We're part of the root race. That's technically what we could say. That is what we've been led to believe. But when I began to do the whole kind of, when I was in the sub-oceanic, when I was pulled in by Noah, and I'm telling you, I was screaming and kicking, and that was a different version of me, which is interesting, but they got another version of me from another system. That was what been part of Noah, but it was linked to me because that DNA that was in that other version of me was another version of me, and therefore I had bleed-throughs with that one, and that led them to work with me as in kind of replicating my current DNA and from the other version of me, and then recreating a type of clone. And that's the clone system I've been fighting ever since, which is what they dumped into what we understand as the underworld, which is not the Hindu underworld, but the underworld of the failed human projects, because that is one that's there too. That's technically hell. So that's another version of the underworld. Again, understanding all these different layers of our reality, which is why you need to work with 49 different layers of our reality to truly grasp what you're actually taking part of when you're beginning to work other dimensionally and other racially. So, and in that one also understanding there is no difference between other planetary systems and our system in the manner of when we talk other dimensional races, it does not mean that they come from other dimensions, because our planet has the same setup of different forms of dimension. It's just different aspects, energetic, vibrational aspects of the same planetary system. So this takes away the whole other dimensional, interdimensional races kind of thing, because this is just, when you look at things from other vibrational settings of our reality, they appear differently and they have different features, but that does not make it interdimensionals in a way of light beings and these kind of things. Let's just get it completely grounded in the context of manifest matter in different organic vessels and different organic forms and vibrational states of energy, imbued with different forms of consciousness structures and different versions of DNA that allows for different species and races to unfold in different energetic settings, which we call planets and galaxies and cosmic realities, and has nothing to do with divinity or anything like that, which is what Alice Collier also is talking about in the lecture on the ranch, which is why I think you should see it so you have something to compare with. Because when we talk about this, it's important to compare what we know with other people, what they have said, and then try to weed through the clutter of this information and find the bits and pieces that resonates with your memory field and your code systems and what you are dealing with. But going back to the root races, I was asking the question of why I saw the Aryan Shivas. So that's the kind of why do I see Hindu gods in a military, American military facility? Okay, that's a good question. That's a really damn good question, and it has been puzzling me for years, as in kind of other than they are in extraterrestrial kind of thing, which is of course also the truth. But there's more to it than meets the eye, that there is always this layer behind layer behind layer, because this is complexity. These are other dimensional structures. Technically, once you get all your 49 chakras up and running, you will be able to perceive all 49 levels of our reality in one fucking go, where you can combine all of the patterns in one huge complex understanding. And when you do that, you will technically have an influential sphere that is as grand and great as what is necessary for planetary logos. So this is just what I'm saying. So again, this is again when we begin talking about, okay, does the planetary logos then take on the planet as his physical form and reincarnate as using the planet as his body? And the answer is a clear no. What a planetary logos does, from what I have seen and what I have experienced, being having had subdimensional and extra-dimensional and interdimensional and different aspect encounters with pieces of older versions of our planetary logos, to put it in that terminology. It's a matter of creating 49 different aspects of yourself that has the 49 level chakra system that is built up of different layers of information systems that are linked up to different cube systems that are using the technology of our solar system to create a planet, and from there administer it by having the ability to expand the influential sphere into these different subversions of himself, because he is a male, and by that function on one of the different dimensions, having what we could call different features of himself, as in being physically incarnated in one of these dimensions, and by that administer whatever function he feels is necessary. And that would be the same way that the Grand Syrian would do it if he were to be integrated into our civilization or our era of time, which meant that he would be part of all of the sub-races of the fifth root race, from where he would be able to incarnate bits and pieces of himself using what we call overshadowing or vertical or horizontal, vertical integration process. That's what it's called. Horizontal is on the same, within same race as if I expand my awareness and you of course are accepting me merging with your field in a healing process. That's a horizontal merging process. Or if when we do technically the science behind what allows women to become pregnant, that is also a horizontal merging process of fields. But going back to the root races, why were there Aryan Shivas in Noah, the military project, that were building their version of the sixth sub-race of the fifth root race, which were Aryans? And Aryans goes with the whole area as we understand of India and Tibet and these areas that were connected to the Syrians. As you remember from my whole advanced classes, I talk about the white Syrians that are behind the Tibetan lineages, and they are also connected to, some of them are in human forms, other in half human, half snake form. So that goes back to the second round of the reptiles, and I always said that the Syrians are reptoid imbued. They have reptoid genetics imbued in them. It's part of what we understand as how DNA replicates itself. The replication processes is similar to the snake that sheds off its skin. That replication comes from the second round or the reptile genetics and what they're able to do to replicate DNA. So that function comes from the reptoid genetics. The avian genetics produce the ability to emit light, to create light codes. That is what the avian genetics do. The insectoid genetics are connected to the mineral kingdom, so to speak, and also plant kingdom, since plants are made of minerals, but they are connected to what we understand as the mineral kingdom. They are therefore also connected to the etheric fields, and they are therefore also connected to the code sheets, which is also important, which is why the military project has used a lot of what we call insectoid genetics to try and combine the gray genetics into human DNA, splicing that one using a bridge of insectoid genetics or the code sheets from insectoids. So these are some of the kits that have got that bridge in them, some of the hybrid kits that are inside our reality, and by that structure shows different features that are more insectoid than actually what we understand as humans. And I have seen evidence of this, if not just in human behavior, but also when they unfortunately from time to time shift into their other dimensional feature where they are then not humans but actually insectoids or whatever they are. And this is also part of the problem of the huge amount of insectoid genetics we have now got on our planet because of these military project experimentations. But going back to the root races, the root race, the military project was all about this, creating the six sub-race, as I talked about in the previous video. That's completely clear for me. Not necessarily be seeding in California, because they're seeded all around the world, but they were selected within what we call Australia, Canada, America, and England. These projects were not to the same degree in Europe and other parts of the world. They had other projects going on. But the version we know from Australia, Canada, England, and America are the what I call specifically the military projects. And even though that Blavatsky prophesied he would be born the beginning of the 21st century, the descendant of the earlier version of this hybridization program that were technically born in the 70s and the 80s and the 90s, their offspring is what was to be born in the 21st century. And I know some of you are from for instance, some of you are mothering from an earlier generation in the late 60s, but this is the exception. Most of the ones were to become offspring of the children born in the 70s. These are the first version of the military projects, which I know of, which many, which I have when I did the template readings years ago, 4 years ago, these were the first ones I encountered, the ones that were born in the 70s, and what they had of different forms of genetics and how they were manipulated as a breeding program. They were not to ignite themselves per se, but they could ignite due to the offspring they would be given birth to, because these children would be engineered in a specific way that would allow for higher consciousness structures. So, and that connects to the staff of Sanat Kumara that is shaped as two snakes intertwined with a diamond at the top, which activates different levels of the DNA. This is enormously important to understand that one when you begin to understand the idea of initiation, because the question is how much is actually initiation and how much is running specific people within specific lineages through specific developmental programs that are original build-up of the holographic teaching system of the original human-humanoid programs, but completely altered into this creation under the Great White Brotherhood, where you again begin to understand that this is the Syrian project working with the Venusians and working with the Martians to develop a human species on our planet, of which we know what we call the Polarian, the Hyperborean, the Lemurian, the Atlanteans, and now the Aryans, with the Aryan Shivas on the top of the hierarchy. So when we talk about root races, do we then mean humans, or do we mean the first seeding of these alien races? And you already got my answer there. Because when I look into how did I get to that clue? So I was looking, again, the Aryan Shivas that were running the military projects, and there were in England, most of the military projects were there run by the Athenians or the Mantids, if you want to put it that way. I just leave it at that. I think I made a video I never uploaded on the Mantids and some of the encounters I had with the Mantids, the Time Lords, but I'll just leave it there because that's not important right now. Just saying that the different military projects in the different countries were run under different groups of aliens. And again, when we say aliens, do we then mean aliens, or do we mean the other dimensional races of our system? And let me say the other dimensional races of our system. It's just easier to say aliens, right? But that's again creates a dichotomy, and we don't need that whole dichotomy, them and us kind of thing, because we are so imbued with whatever genetics that they have left in our solar system, and our foundation is originally on the same level, but from our solar system. So we are, compared to them, we are the aliens, but they have taken over our system or have tried to undo the effects of the timeline event, which is my version of things, trying to repair what went wrong during the timeline event and getting us all back on track with the original understanding of the human-humanoid project. Not that this is all benevolent, because as people and these races got more and more infected, it turned into the complete opposition and polarity was created, which is why we now have good and evil and all of these kind of things. So this is not something that was naturally there to begin with, but are a complete effect of the timeline event. So what I'm here saying is, how did I get to the understanding of, okay, the root races are not about humans. Interesting enough, it's about the gods and their human form on this planet. So the first root race of something is always the first version of the different other dimensional races that chooses to go into our realm of reality and create organic vessels, which will then become the progenitors of the following sub-races. Okay, so that's what they are. And you can say the Aryan Shivas were the first subrace of the Aryan root race. But the Aryan Shivas are, since you kind of get the Aryan Shiva. Shiva is the destructive aspect of the trinity of the Hindu gods. And then you have the Brahims, which are the ones that the sages that later on taught the whole chakra system going on, the creator aspect. And then you had which were highly avian infused. And then you had the what is called the, sometimes it's connected to Shakti, which is the female procreation, typical giving birth aspect, which is so excuse my language, fucking annoying that females is always about breeding, right? So this is why I want to put in an Egyptian goddess here, so we get a little bit of a different understanding of that context, so we don't all get brainwashed into understanding, oh yeah, the mother aspect is all about giving birth to children, which is absolutely nothing to do with that. Just get that one clear. It's about order, harmony, and balance. That's the feminine wisdom aspect. Let us keep that one as clear as possible. And there used to be other dimensional female species out there that were functioning as judges, that were functioning as warriors, that were functioning as being part of this system. The Lyran civilization had a huge portion of feminine consciousness structure and very little male consciousness structure. I'm just putting it in there so you didn't get all wrapped up in all this male consciousness BS and forget there's an other side to it. The Pleiadians were also female oriented to begin with. They had males, but we were all under what we call the female consciousness structure, order, balance, and harmony, scientific oriented within a construction setting of creation and mentorship and education and agricultural settings, if you want to put it after the timeline event, because before the timeline events we didn't bother about plants because that's a side effect of the timeline event and are created to transform some of the consciousness structures that were then merged into the solidified racial grids of this system, which is why fetal or plant DNA is very nutritious for our human DNA kind of things, because they come from technically the same family, even though the human DNA has been altered through years and years and years of animalistic products and eating flesh from other life forms, which has altered the human DNA into being animalistic in its origin instead of being plant-based, which goes with the copper skin races that were plant-based as well, which goes with the reptoid replication type of DNA. Again, combining information that might not mean a lot to you, but as you work with your molecular level, that will begin to make sense. How you, through your plant-based food, recalibrate your entire second round level Hyperborean snake DNA replication sensation system into becoming much more sensitive. And that is done through the rebuilding of your entire central nervous system and as well as your entire peripheral nervous system and the glands and everything your body is made of. Instead of being animalistically DNA oriented, it becomes fetal or plant DNA based, which allows you to become much more sensitive and begin to work with the other dimensions. That's the first step towards higher awareness, to get out of the whole death DNA type of sequencing, which is what most humans are built up of. So the root races are, you can say the highest level of the root races is the first seed race. So, and we can go with the Aryan Shivas, which is a divine aspect, to use that divinity language again. But these are the original blue-skinned Syrians that were part of that group that called themselves the Aryan Shivas. But they had the destructive aspect, as in kind of when you do Hindu teachings, you have the tamasic, which is the inertia destructive aspect, and you have the raja, which is the activity, and you have the sattva, which is the harmony, order, and balance. That's technically the female. Again, this trinity. So when we talk about a third dimensional system, which ours is in, is that whatever you're dealing with, you have to learn to think in trinities. You have to learn to think within a triangle that is part of the same unity. It just goes without saying. You can't have raja or activity without having order and balance and inertia. These go together. You can't have a root race that is only the destructive element, that is the breaking down of DNA, the breaking down of molecular structures, the breaking down of whatever technology that is there to dissolve it of its holographic features and dissolve the code systems. You also have to have the rajas, or which is also part of a Hindu teaching system. Pentali is there. Bailey mentions that teaching system as well, the Raja Yoga. And you have the Hatha Yoga, or the Brahims, and their avian snake-infused chakra system teaching that goes with later on the whole activation of the fire energies, which means you imbue it with the Raptoid level that goes with the Aryan Shivas. Again, all of this understanding of different forms of DNA that is combined in a trinity. When you begin to work on your timelines and you work the clearing of your timelines, you always have to look for the trinity of whoever is working with you. You can have a trinity of grays and insectoids and dark ones. Not until you get all three layers of the code that is in you and is affecting your field will you get that code sheet cleared of its virus programs that are linking up to you and removing the symbol. The symbol is always within the triangle. The symbol is within the triangle of three different contributors of DNA that allows them to work within your energy fields and connect themselves to you through the symbol and the triangle. So this is just goes without saying. So that's the fourth dimension you're working with, that kind of goes with the three dimensions of the three aspects of matter and energy and consciousness that is then imbued with a symbol from the fourth dimension that allows them to tamper with your energy system. So the root races are all about the other races and their first organic vessel within this system, which then becomes gods. So that's just kind of erasing the whole divinity kind of thing. These are just the first root races. And then from there, they create their human projects. So this is how that's the overlords. So this is how they come in and take control of our system. They create the first sub-race, which is the divine race, so to speak. And then they have all of the sub-races that follows in different areas on our planet, which will then be overseen by the first root race and its first sub-race. So these are the administrators. So these are the ones that are administering the human projects. And whatever comes after can, of course, be other levels of colonization, but they will typically spring from the same project under that Manu or under that overlord or under that progenitor, all depending on how we are looking, which language we are talking from. And again, when you have this in the root race, you have literally, Blavatsky is saying she thought that the reseeding of the Lemurian race, or was it the Atlantean race, was done through one Manu, which then literally gave the DNA for all of the sub-races that followed. That is, first and foremost, it's not difficult when you understand the whole replication and the cloning of DNA and all of these kind of things. It becomes completely logic, but it also goes into the whole kind of, well, then this Manu or this progenitor, his whatever he replicates of his template and puts into his underlings and his human projects and whatever is, will always be connected to him. And that's explained a lot to me why many of these aspects of our planetary logos, which probably use the same technology, because you have to have one that sets the standard, right? One that does it first so other can follow and do the same stupidities. Well, that would explain why many of the military projects, as they got the insectoids, the genetics got taken over by the Orions, which are insectoid and have become insectoids, not to begin with, but that's what they have stumbled down the regression ladder and have become. Well, then it explains why that contaminated different versions of our planetary logos and why these programs needed to be taken down, the father program or the progenitor programs. And I know for many of you this will not make sense, but I'm here. Some of you who have worked with me, you know exactly what I'm talking about, that you have one aspect of what used to be a Manu, which then it runs civilizations, as it's called in the Bailey material, and that one other dimensional humanoid has replicated his DNA in many different forms and inserted in and become the all father of underlings and groups of children and groups of humans and groups of civilizations where he from time to time can overshadow and enter as he pleases. And this video is entirely about my information from things, nothing to do with Bailey, but the way that it's built up in the Bailey material is just a complete confirmation of what I have seen and experienced, as well as with the Blavatsky stuff. So this is a specific type of alien technology. So that means when we talk about, okay, we have 200 people that have, for instance, serum genetics in their brain structure. Are they from the same Manu or progenitor? Because if so, well, then the releasing of these people and their template would have to involve, and I'm here talking about enslavement systems, would have to involve, to get to that template, dissolve the code systems, build it back up to the cube that is running these templates, and finding the original progenitor DNA that is lodged into the cube from where these hive mind structures or soul matrices, as it's mentioned in the quantum sciences, they call it soul matrices. And if you start understand what a matrix is, look up quantum science and look up what a quantum matrix is, you will understand what that means. It is a fractal. It is a simple equation. It's a simple set of DNA that is then replicated into infinity using different matrices or templates from where it can develop through the laws of diversity and evolution. And this is how the humanoids do it. But this is, you could say that's a good thing when we talk about if we were talking within a benevolent system. But if that system is taken over by hostile forces, you go for the cubes that holds these programs, and then you get access to all of these templates. And that is technically what the Orions did. And their alien invasion technology, their AI technology that took over the military projects and turned them into something completely different. So I will end this video with that background information. I know these are some of the things I talk about in the whole integration class 5, but as you know, I'm rounding off the old material, and this one I can put out here because we already began the work and we are comparing stuff. And those of you who want more in-depth information, you do the whole integration classes where I talk about these projects, not in this manner, because I'm using a context that is already available for you out on the internet, decided by the people behind the Bailey material to put it out for free. So it's already out there. It has been worked with for 100 years. So I'm just using that context. And then I'm adding in newer information of what I have understood. And if you take these videos and combine it with the whole integration classes one more time and all of my material, it will begin to make so much sense to you. And that is why I am doing this as I am doing here. Thank you.